March 24th, 1945. Combat Information Center, USS Bush, northwest of Okinawa. The glowing phosphorescent sweep of the SG surface search radar painted ghostly echoes across the darkened screen. Radar operator second class James Patterson adjusted the gain control as another sweep refreshed the display. Multiple contacts bearing 340 degrees, range 62 miles, estimated 50-plus aircraft, inbound from Kyushu. Commander Rollin Westholm reached for the TBS radio handset. Task Force 58 had positioned 16 radar picket stations around Okinawa, creating an electronic fence that no Japanese aircraft could penetrate undetected. What none of them knew was that this technological advantage would trigger the most. Desperate and determined aerial assault in naval history. The Imperial Japanese Navy's Kamikaze special attack units had trained for one purpose: break through American defenses and trade their lives for enemy warships. The radar picket destroyers would become their first targets, cut through the pickets, and their invasion fleet at Okinawa would be exposed. The mathematics of sacrifice had replaced traditional naval strategy. One pilot, one plane, one ship. The Pacific War had transformed American destroyers from submarine hunters into electronic sentinels. Each radar picket station positioned 15 to 95 miles from Point Bolo, the designated reference point on Okinawa's Zampa Misaki Peninsula. 7 stations operational by April 1st, 9 more. Activated as the campaign progressed, the USS Laffey steamed through Pacific swells at 15 knots. Her Allen M. Sumner-class hull displacing 2,200 tons of seawater. Commander Frederick Julian Becton stood in the combat. Information Center studying the radar repeater scope. His ship carried 336 men and an arsenal of anti-aircraft weapons specifically configured to destroy incoming aircraft. 6 5-inch dual-purpose guns in twin mounts, 12 40mm Bofors in 2 quad and 2 twin mounts, 11 20mm Oerlikon cannons, and mounted throughout the ship, the latest fire control radars. That would make naval history. The Mark 37 gun director with Mark 25 fire control radar. The combat information center represented American technology at its most sophisticated. Unlike the primitive radar plotting rooms of 1942, the CIC integrated multiple radar systems into a unified tactical display. Air search radar with ranges exceeding 60 miles, surface search capability to 15 miles, height finding equipment to determine aircraft altitude, fighter direction circuits linking the destroyer to combat air patrols overhead. The mathematics were revolutionary. Traditional visual gunnery achieved hit rates of less than 2% against maneuvering aircraft. Radar-directed fire control increased accuracy to 20% under optimal conditions. When combined with proximity-fused shells that detonated near targets without requiring direct hits, the defensive firepower multiplied exponentially. Lieutenant Howell Chickering commanded Landing Craft Support Large 51, one of the gunboats assigned, to support the radar pickets. His assessment was blunt and accurate. The destroyers were bait, deliberately positioned to attract enemy attacks away from the main fleet. Draw the kamikazes to the pickets, vector in fighter coverage, destroy them before they reached the carriers and transports. Aboard the training base at Kanoya Airfield, Lieutenant Yukio Seki reviewed his attack. Orders with the pilots of the 201st Air Group. Operation Kikusui No. 1. Floating. Chrysanthemums. 355 kamikaze aircraft and 341 conventional bombers would strike the American fleet in coordinated waves. The youngest pilot was 17 years old. 7 days of training had taught him to fly in formation and identify ship types. 2 days of takeoff practice, 2 days of formation flying, 3 days of approaching and attacking a target. Navigation training was minimal. The escorts would guide them to the target area. Combat maneuvering was irrelevant. Their mission required only the ability to aim and dive. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi had organized the first official kamikaze unit in October 1944. Lieutenant Yukio Seki had led the first successful attack, sinking USS St. Lo on October 25, 1944, transforming suicide attacks from spontaneous acts into systematic strategy. The pilots understood American radar capabilities better than most Japanese commanders realized. The destroyers positioned around Okinawa were not just early warning stations. They controlled fighter aircraft that could intercept attacking formations 50 miles from the fleet. But the radar pickets had a critical vulnerability. Operating in isolation 30 to 60 miles from mutual support, they could not concentrate defensive firepower. A determined mass attack could overwhelm individual destroyers before help arrived. The mathematics of the tokko were simple and brutal. If 1 in 6 kamikaze aircraft hit their targets, the exchange rate favored Japan. 1 pilot and 1 obsolete aircraft for hundreds of American sailors and a $1 million warship. The American ships formed their defensive perimeter as dawn approached on April 6, 1945. Each picket station maintained a 5,000-yard patrol radius, destroyer at the center, 2 to 4 support craft in diamond formation, speed 15 knots, course reversed every 30 minutes to complicate submarine targeting. The new radar systems transformed naval warfare into an electronic battlefield. SC-2 air search. Radar sweeping the skies every 4 seconds. SG surface search maintaining continuous coverage of the ocean surface. Mark 12 and Mark 22 fire control radars locked onto individual targets for precision gunnery. SP height-finding radar calculating aircraft. Altitudes for fighter interception. Combat air patrol maintained continuous coverage, but the distances were vast. 2 F-6F Hellcats or F-4U Corsairs per station during daylight hours. Response time from the carriers to the outer picket stations, 20 to 30 minutes under optimal conditions. Those minutes would determine survival. At 0300 on April 6th, radar operators across the picket line detected the first wave of Kikusui. Number 1. Multiple raids approaching from the northwest. The tactical plot showed over 100 contacts converging on the radar picket stations. Fighter Direction Officer Lieutenant Frank Adams vectored his CAP to intercept 2 Corsairs against 30-plus kamikazes. The mathematics were impossible. The kamikaze formation had already begun their descent toward wavetop height, using the radar horizon to mask their final approach. On Destroyer Bush at Radar Picket Station Number 1, the CIC team tracked incoming raids from multiple directions. Raid 1, 40 aircraft bearing 340. Raid 2, 20-plus bearing 015. Raid 3, composition unknown, bearing 285. Commander Westholm had trained his gun crews for this moment. Continuous tracking of assigned targets. Fire when aircraft reached 12,000 yards, regardless of solution quality. Maintain. Maximum rate of fire until target destroyed or passed overhead. No check fire. For identification. Anything approaching the picket line was hostile. The Bush's ordeal began at 1500. After shooting down 2 approaching aircraft, a Nakajima B-6N torpedo bomber broke through the defensive fire. The Kamikaze struck. Between the 2 stacks on the starboard side, its bomb exploding in the forward. Engine room. Steam erupted through ruptured lines. 14 men died instantly. But Bush remained afloat, damaged control teams fighting fires while gunners continued, engaging incoming aircraft. At 1700, destroyer Colquhoun maneuvered to assist Bush, bringing 4 cap fighters with her. What followed was aerial chaos, 40 to 50. Japanese aircraft swarmed over the 2 destroyers. Colquhoun took her first hit at 1730, a Zero crashing into her main deck. 3 more kamikazes struck in rapid succession. Commander George Wilson ordered abandon ship as Colquhoun broke apart and sank. 35 of her crew were lost. Bush continued fighting despite severe damage. At 1725, a second kamikaze crashed into her port side between the stacks. The explosion nearly severed the ship. At 1745, a third kamikaze struck the port side above the main deck. Ammunition began exploding. Fires spread beyond control. At 1830, Bush rolled over and sank. 87 of her 307-man crew were lost, including members. Of Commander James Willis's staff, who had been aboard as Commander Destroyer Division 48. The survivors spent up to 10 hours in the water before rescue. LCSL 64 was first on scene at 21:30, pulling exhausted men from oil-covered waters while under. Threat of continued air attack. The mathematics of April 6th were staggering. In one day, kamikazes sank destroyers Bush, Colquhoun and Emmons, plus destroyer Minesweeper. Emmons and 2 ammunition ships, 10 other ships damaged. But the radar pickets had fulfilled their mission. The main fleet at Hagushi anchorage remained largely untouched. The destroyers had absorbed the fury meant for the invasion force. USS Laffey arrived at Radar Picket Station No. 1 on April 15, 1945, relieving destroyer J. William Ditter. Commander Becton reviewed the tactical situation with his department heads. The Japanese had shifted tactics after the initial attacks, small groups infiltrating at dawn and dusk, individual aircraft using cloud cover and rain squalls for concealment, coordinated attacks from multiple directions to overwhelm fire control systems. The Laffey had survived kamikaze attacks at Lingayen Gulf and Iwo Jima, but Okinawa was different. The proximity to Japanese airfields on Kyushu. And Formosa meant continuous attacks, no respite, no safe periods. General, quarters from dawn to dusk, and often through the night. On April 16th, the situation developed exactly as Becton had anticipated. 0727, radar contact, single aircraft bearing 020, range 11 miles. The Val approached at wave top. Height, using the morning sun for concealment. Becton ordered hard right. Rudder and flank speed. The destroyer heeled sharply as she accelerated. Passed 30 knots. The Val pilot adjusted his approach angle, aiming for the bridge. Range 2,000 yards. All starboard guns firing. The aircraft. Absorbed dozens of hits but kept coming. At 500 yards, a 5-inch shell detonated directly beneath the Val. The explosion tore off the left wing and sent the fuselage cartwheeling into the sea 50 yards from Laffey's hull. But this was only the beginning. At 0800, CIC reported multiple raids converging on Station 1, estimated 50 aircraft in separate groups, Capi engaging but heavily outnumbered. What followed was 80 minutes of the most intense combat in destroyer history. 22 kamikaze aircraft would attack Laffey individually and in groups. The first 8 were destroyed by devastatingly accurate gunfire. The gun crews had developed a rhythm, track approaching aircraft, concentrate fire from multiple mounts, maintain continuous fire regardless of hits observed, switch to new target, immediately upon splash, no celebration, no pause. The next aircraft was always seconds away. At 0827, the 9th kamikaze overwhelmed the defensive fire, a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy approaching from astern where fewer guns could bear. Despite taking multiple 40mm and 20mm hits, the aircraft struck gun mount 53, the after 5-inch mount. The explosion killed 6 men instantly, including the mount captain, gunner's mate first class, Lawrence Delowski, who had been directing the mount in local control. Fires erupted across the fantail. Ammunition began cooking off. Mount 53 was destroyed. 1/6 of Laffey's heavy firepower eliminated. The 10th kamikaze struck minutes later. Another Judy attacking from the port quarter crashed into the afterdeck house, destroying 2 20mm mounts and their crews. The fires spread toward the after magazine. Damage control parties fought desperately to contain the flames while gunners continued engaging new attackers. The 11th attacker, Val, dropped a bomb that struck between the stacks, penetrating 2. The machine shop before exploding. The blast ruptured steam lines and knocked out electrical power aft. Gun mounts 42 and 43 lost power and had to be operated manually. Rate of fire dropped dramatically. At 0900, Laffey faced her most desperate moment. 4 kamikazes attacked. Simultaneously from different directions, the overwhelmed fire control system could only track 2. The first, a Val, crashed into mount. The second struck the port side near the waterline. The third dropped a bomb that exploded in the after engine room. The fourth was destroyed 100 yards from the ship by desperate close-range fire. From a 20mm mount whose gunner, seaman Arifo Trides, stayed at. His position despite shrapnel wounds, Laffey was burning from bridge to stern. Her rudder jammed hard left, forcing the ship into a continuous. Circle speed reduced to 8 knots, 1/3 of her crew casualties. 6 gun mounts destroyed or damaged. Commander Becton received damage. Reports from all departments. The situation was critical, but not hopeless. The forward guns still functioned. Damage control teams were containing the fires. The ship remained afloat despite massive damage. When Assistant Communications Officer Lieutenant Frank Manson asked if they should prepare to abandon ship, Becton's response became legendary. "No, I'll never abandon ship as long as a single gun will fire." A nearby lookout added quietly, "And if I can find one man to fire, it." 4 more kamikazes attacked in the next 20 minutes. The surviving gunners destroyed 3. The 4th, a Zero carrying a 550-pound bomb, crashed into the base of the forward stack. The explosion lifted the entire bridge structure before slamming it back down. Every man in CIC was knocked unconscious momentarily. When they recovered, thick smoke filled the compartment. Radar scopes flickered and died. For 3 critical minutes, Laffey was blind and mute. The 20th Kamikaze approached during this chaos, without radar warning or coordinated. Defense, individual gun crews engaged on their own initiative. Gunners. Mate First Class Robert Carr on Mount 44 spotted the Val diving from 8,000 feet. Despite the mount operating in manual mode, his crew maintained tracking and fired continuously. The Val exploded 500 feet. Above the ship, showering debris across the forward deck. The 21st. Kamikaze came from astern, hidden in the smoke of Laffey's own fires. A Kate torpedo bomber at wave height. It aimed for the forward magazine. Seaman Foutrides, still at his damaged 20mm mount, saw the aircraft emerge from smoke 400 yards away. He triggered a long burst, walking, tracers into the Kate's engine. The aircraft staggered, nosed down, and crashed 30 yards from Laffey's port side. The explosion drenched the burning destroyer with seawater that helped suppress fires. The 22nd and final Kamikaze approached at 09:47. By now, Laffey had been under continuous attack for 80 minutes. The crew, exhausted. Ammunition running low. Defensive firepower reduced by 70%. But LCS L-51 had been fighting alongside Laffey throughout. Lieutenant Chickering ordered maximum speed and positioned his gunboat between the Kamikaze and the destroyer. The Val pilot had seconds to choose. Continue toward the valuable destroyer or accept the lesser target. He chose Laffey. The Kamikaze passed 50 feet over LCSL 51, its fixed landing gear nearly striking the gunboat's mast. Chickering's gunners poured fire into the aircraft's belly. The Val began trailing. Smoke, then flame. It crashed into the sea 100 yards from Laffey. The battle was over. Laffey had survived 22 kamikaze attacks in 80 minutes, hit by 6 aircraft and 4 bombs, 32 killed, 71 wounded. But she remained afloat. Her survival seemed impossible, but the mathematics told the real story. Laffey's gunners had fired over 8,000 rounds of ammunition. They destroyed 9 kamikazes with direct gunfire and damaged 4 others severely enough that they missed or crashed short. The fire control radar had maintained tracking. Solutions despite battle damage. The proximity fuses had multiplied. Defensive effectiveness. The Combat Information Center had coordinated. The defense, even when partially disabled. Technology and training had prevailed over sacrifice. The radar picket system at Okinawa represented a fundamental shift in naval warfare. For the first time in history, electronic detection and fire control had become more important than armor or speed. The destroyers stationed around Okinawa were not just scouts. They were command and control platforms managing a 3-dimensional battle space that extended 60 miles horizontally and 30,000 feet vertically. Fighter direction teams embarked on the picket destroyers' revolutionized air defense. During the Okinawa campaign, they controlled over 5,000 fighter interceptions, resulting in the destruction of approximately 1,900 enemy aircraft before they reached attack positions. The radar had seen what human eyes could not. tracked what human minds could not process, guided weapons too, targets in darkness, weather and smoke. But the human cost was staggering. During the 82-day Okinawa campaign, the radar picket, destroyers absorbed the fury of Japanese desperation, 15 destroyers, and destroyer minesweepers sunk on radar picket duty, 45, damaged. Over 4,900 sailors killed or wounded on the picket stations, alone. The destroyers had fulfilled their mission as electronic sentinels and magnets for enemy attacks. They had protected the main fleet by sacrificing themselves. On May 4th, kamikaze attacks sank destroyers, Morrison and Luce at radar picket station number 1. Morrison went, down in minutes after being hit by 4 aircraft in rapid succession. 152 of her 331-man crew were lost. The destroyers. Radar had tracked the incoming raids perfectly. Her guns had fired, continuously. Her fire control had been exemplary. But when 40 aircraft attack a single destroyer, mathematics become destiny. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi, who had helped develop kamikaze tactics, would write after. The war about the radar picket battles. The American destroyers fought with incredible courage. Their radar gave them advantages we had not anticipated. They could see our aircraft forming up over our own airfields. They tracked us across hundreds of miles of ocean. Their fire control was devastating in its accuracy. But he also noted a critical observation. We believed the radar pickets were vulnerable because of their isolation. We were wrong. The radar connected them to a defensive network that stretched across the entire fleet. When we attacked a single destroyer, we faced the coordinated defense of dozens of ships and hundreds of aircraft. The technological gap had become insurmountable. Japanese pilots flying obsolete aircraft, with minimal training, faced radar-directed guns firing proximity-fused shells, American fighter aircraft vectored by shipboard controllers, intercepted raids 50 miles from their targets. Electronic warfare had replaced visual combat, the psychological impact on Japanese. Operations was equally devastating. Pilots who had expected to find scattered surprised targets instead encountered precisely coordinated defenses. Radar operators in air-conditioned compartments tracked their approaches from takeoff to impact. Fighter directors speaking calmly into radio handsets orchestrated their destruction with mathematical precision. The age of the warrior had ended. The age of the technician had begun. By May 11th, Japanese naval commanders had modified their tactics in response to radar picket effectiveness. Attacks would concentrate on stations where weather degraded radar performance, low-altitude approaches using terrain masking from nearby islands, window chaff dispensed to create false radar returns. Electronic warfare had evolved on both sides, but the Americans continued to improve their systems faster than the Japanese could develop countermeasures. New SP height-finding radars eliminated blind spots in vertical coverage. Improved IFF systems prevented friendly fire incidents. Data links between ships allowed coordinated defense of multiple stations. The technological advantage accelerated rather than diminished. The destroyer Hugh W. Hadley at Picket Station 15 demonstrated the evolved defensive capability on May 11th, under attack by over 150 kamikaze and conventional aircraft in multiple waves. Hadley's CIC managed 6 separate radar plots simultaneously while directing 12. Cap fighters and coordinating gunfire with 3 supporting ships. The result? 23 enemy aircraft destroyed. Hadley severely damaged, but afloat. 28 dead, 67 wounded. Without radar, the outcome would have been annihilation. Commander Mullaney, Hadley's captain, would later report, "The radar picket duty was the naval equivalent of the infantry point man, out front, alone, and the first to get hit. But unlike the infantry point man who could only see a few yards ahead, our radar gave us the eyes of an eagle. We could see death coming from 50 miles away and prepare to meet it." The industrial implications were equally decisive. American shipyards were producing new radar sets at rates exceeding 200 per month. Japanese aircraft production had fallen to fewer than 500 planes. Monthly, most of obsolete design. The mathematical equation was inexorable. American technology was advancing faster than Japanese. Pilots could be trained. Each destroyed kamikaze represented months of training investment that could not be replaced, each damaged. American destroyer returned to service with improved equipment and experienced crews. The attrition warfare that Japanese commanders had calculated would exhaust American resolve instead demonstrated American industrial supremacy. On June 22, 1945, organized Japanese resistance on Okinawa ended. The radar picket stations had been operational for 90 days. During that period, they had tracked thousands of air attacks, vectored fighters to intercept over 1,900 raids, and directly engaged approximately 600 kamikaze aircraft that penetrated to attack positions. The strategic implications transformed Pacific warfare. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, incorporated massive radar picket lines based on Okinawa experiences. Hundreds of destroyers equipped with the latest radar systems would create electronic barriers around invasion fleets. Fighter direction would be centralized in purpose-built command ships. The Japanese homeland would face not individual ship defenses, but integrated air defense. Networks spanning hundreds of miles. Admiral Matome Ugaki, commander of the 5th Air Fleet, made his final assessment before conducting his own kamikaze attack on August 15, 1945. The American radar pickets have created an invisible wall around their forces. Our pilots crash against this wall like birds against glass. We see the target but cannot reach it. Technology has defeated spirit. The USS Laffey survived the war and served for another 30 years, eventually becoming a museum ship. Her radar arrays, though primitive, by modern standards had represented a revolution in naval warfare. The ability to see beyond visual range, to track multiple targets. Simultaneously, to direct weapons with mathematical precision had changed combat forever. Commander Becton, reflecting on the radar picket experience, provided crucial insight. We proved at Okinawa that wars would no longer be won by the side with the bravest warriors, or the most willing to sacrifice. Wars would be won by the side with the best technology and the industrial capacity to produce it in overwhelming quantities. The radar picket destroyers were not just ships, they were the embodiment of American technical superiority. The human cost had been terrible. Nearly 5,000 American naval personnel killed or wounded on radar picket duty alone. Nearly 2,000 kamikaze sorties flown, hundreds of young Japanese pilots, crashed into the sea, achieving nothing but their own deaths. But from this sacrifice emerged a new understanding of warfare. Electronic. Systems would determine future battles. Information superiority would prove more decisive than firepower. The ability to process and act on data faster than an opponent would become the ultimate weapon. The radar picket destroyers had not just defended against kamikazes, they had demonstrated the future of warfare. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, dozens of destroyers rest on the ocean floor alongside. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft, their crews honored by both sides, for courage in the face of impossible odds. But their sacrifice marked more than heroism. It marked the moment when technology became the dominant factor in warfare, the moment when radar operators in darkened combat information centers became more important than admirals on bridge wings, the moment when mathematical calculations replaced warrior intuition. The future belonged to nations capable of producing sophisticated electronics and training operators to use them effectively. The radar picket destroyers of Okinawa had not just won a battle, they had revealed the nature of all future conflicts. The invisible electronic battlefield would determine victory. The nation with superior sensors, processors, and data links would dominate. The age of electronic warfare had begun, written in the steel and blood of radar picket destroyers that stood between kamikazes and the American fleet. Their legacy lives, not in their armor or guns, but in the radar arrays that gave them the power to see death approaching and the technology to defeat it.